there. It's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds, leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. So is Adam Finklestein, Director of Scouting, 24/7 Sports. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to the like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you're not yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. It's the middle of July in the United States of America, which means we've all been out on the road watching college basketball coaches, watch future college basketball players. I was at Peach Jam this weekend. So was Norlander after also attending an Adidas event a few hours away. Fink, give me your rundown. Where all have you been over the past week or so?
Well, I started at Adidas on Tuesday, did Adidas for 2 days, and I did Under Armour, came home. My daughter had a play. Shout out for that. So I did that. Was home for 18 hours. Then I drove to Hoop Group to see a couple nationally ranked guys, and I'm home for 36 hours. Then I'm going to Peach Jam for 6 days.
You know what? Just a side note. I love that you did that. You made time for that because I know sometimes we're all busy. I talk to even coaches about this. You're on the road and it's like, I don't have time to get back home. I'm not going to be able to be there. You'll never regret going back home for exactly what you went back home for.
And there's nothing like announcing to a national podcast audience what a good dad I am, right?
There you go.
Correct.
I miss stuff. We all miss stuff, but I'm way more aware of it at this age than I was probably when I was a little younger. I want to start by just getting your guys' thoughts on a piece that we'll be publishing a little later today at cbssports.com. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it. And the premise of the column is an interaction that I had with a coach Thursday night at the airport. I had a layover in Atlanta and bump into a coach who I've known for a long time. And, you see somebody at the airport, this is the first question always. Hey, where are you going? Everybody wants to know where you're going. So I was like, hey, where are you headed? And he told me, and he said, where are you headed? And I said, Peach Jam. And at some point he said, oh, it'll be the most stress-free Peach Jam in history. And I said, really? What do you mean by that? And here's what he meant. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, in years past, you'd go to Peach Jam and you've got, you got an idea of how many kids you need in your class, and you've identified them, and now you're doing all the, you're sitting baseline, you're doing everything you need to do to put yourself in position. And there was always like real stress attached to it because you felt like then who do you get? Who's your backup plan? And the point the coach was making is now there is always a backup plan. In fact, the backup plan should maybe in many cases be, your initial plan. His point was me and my staff can be here. We got kids we like. And if we would take a commitment from some of them, but if we don't get them, it's fine because in April, somebody 2, 3, 4 years older and maybe 2 or 3 times better equipped to help me win next year is going to be there for me. And so there's less pressure to get things done this summer than there has ever been. I'll start with you, Fink. Do you subscribe to that? Do you see that?
To a certain extent. I think it's multi-layered in my experience, because although the NIL picture is a little more clear this year than maybe it was last year, I think the portal's kind of been running like this for the last couple of summers. And in my experience, I think it's the programs that put high school recruiting to the side and say, hey, we only have 3 to give. We're not even worried about high school guys. Well, they end up with 6 to give in the spring, and they can't get 6 out of the portal, and it usually ends up backfiring. So to me, the programs that have got this figured out are the ones that get the same high school guys they normally would, recognize that, yes, there's going to be more supply, but there's also going to be more attrition at the end of the year, so they're going to have to get that many more guys. And if you don't still prioritize the high school ranks to a certain extent, you're just going to have bit off more than you can chew in the transfer portal.
Norlander, add to that.
So I think what GP's getting at here tends to be true. This is based off of talking to a few other coaches there. If you're not chasing a top 10 player, and if you're not a mid-major coach, but you're a power conference coach that feels comfortable in working the portal and roster building. Now, there's not to say that when the coach that was talking to GP about this, that there isn't like pressure to still do the job. There is. It's just the things that are attached to the July live period seem to have been muted to a certain extent because a lot of this stems from not just going in the portal and adding that and value that they're finding in players that are 21, 22. By the way, this is the last year of COVID eligibility for the bonus year this upcoming season. So there's been a lot of that as well. And so with that and freshmen having less impact than ever, I'll have a column probably go up Tuesday kind of related to that as well with the COVID year ending. Just in terms of just in terms of transformative impact, I think that's where this stems from. And to this point, how about this? And we got to talk about a lot of these guys, but you guys were not there yesterday. I did Peach Jam on Sunday, and I was truly taken aback at what I saw. The only other instance I can remember of this at any recruiting event over the past, 12, 13 years of going to this stuff was when it applied to Amani Bates and actually wrote on it. But I saw AJ Dybantsa and Tyran Stokes, the number one player in 25 and 26. They played for the Oakland Soldiers, and they were playing against the New York Renaissance. So you have two number one prospects. And I watched their game, and it's Sunday. Coaches can still be there. A lot of media wasn't there because a lot of them are like things going back, and that's a whole other deal. They kind of botched the schedule with Nike, but I'm told that's going to change back to the way we normally are expecting it for next year, which is good, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. Anyway, the point is this game was so lightly attended, I couldn't believe it. We're talking about two players tracking to potentially be the number one pick in the 26 and 27 drafts. And for Dybantsa in particular, who's going to release his father told me his final 5 to 7 schools will be publicly released by the end of the month. We'll see if that happens, whatever. There are schools that are recruiting him were there, but the only head coach that would be in that mix that was there for most of the game, I think, was Nate Oates, and he wasn't even there the whole game. Like, he might have been bouncing back. There wasn't one assistant here, but I couldn't remember a time where you'd have the number one recruit, let alone a player of Dybantsa's level. And I understand, like, he's going to play again, like, later this week, and rest assured, when he's playing Friday and the coaches can be there, like, they're going to be 3-4 deep. But the only time was Amani Bates, when everyone thought Amani Bates was never going to college. We kept hearing he'll never play, and his father kept insisting he's going to college. I'm telling you, that was the case. But, like, it was weird when he was, I think, a rising junior. His games weren't like heavily attended, and it was like, why is no one recruiting the number one player in the class? So to GP's point, I just couldn't believe that it was a Sunday game at noon, and you really would, and it was in the main gym, and you would have thought this was like, an 8 a.m. game in gym 3 off to the side, and I just hadn't seen that in a while. So I knew you were going to write, GP. When I was looking around, I was like, I can't believe this, man. Like, Calipari was also, I'll say this because I don't want to not mention him. Calipari was the only head coach of a team that could conceivably recruiting him that was there from the tip until the game finished.
Did you already get a text message that you didn't?
I did not, but I just remembered it in real time here. Yes.
Oh, and you'll know this better than us. I don't even get involved in that, like the tweets about who's in the gym. Yeah. I don't play, Yeah. But if you leave somebody out, you'll get that text message.
Oh yeah, and you can see it on Twitter. Like, if you've been following this stuff, like, you can, and it even happens in the NBA. Like, without naming it, like, you can see tweet goes out and it's like, needs to be amended because they just got a text message, whether it's from the college coach or the agent or whoever. It's like addendum to the tweet, meaning just got a text.
Yeah, right. So Norlander, you just touched on something that I don't know if I'm going to focus much of the column on it, but it is something I heard from various coaches. And one of them is, you guys know it, we've all been doing this for a long time at this point. You get to the gym early, make sure the kids see you during warm-up lines, stand under the basket, whatever you're doing. Yeah. And coaches are telling me now, yeah, it still matters as long as everything is still equal money-wise or in the ballpark money-wise. But I'm not speaking about AJ specifically, but I promise you, talk to the coaches who are recruiting him, and here's what they would tell you. Yeah, I would have loved to have been there, but I had other things I needed to do. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to money anyway. It's not going to come down to how many games I saw him play. It's coming down to money. And, that will be the determining factor.
Yeah. No doubt about it. That's what I was going to say. Like, with some of these big name guys, I don't think it has as much to do with the transfer portal, and it has to do with the reality of what the basis of the decision is going to be made by. And sometimes that's not just college either. Some of these kids are making high school decisions based on that. Now that's just starting to come out a little bit, but NIL is the driving force here, and it's all about buying power. And I hate to be so, just candidly capitalistic, I will say about that.
Yeah.
But that's just the reality of it. You can sit courtside all you want. If you don't have the buying power and the kid's got to take half as much money to come to you as he would somewhere else. And this isn't specific to those players you mentioned. I think that's the case just about everywhere now. It's the rare kid, and there were some in last year's class who took less money to go other places. But buying power is the biggest domino in the recruiting process.
Yeah, I talked to Chris Jans about it at Mississippi State, and he said, like, facilities and relationships and all of that stuff still matters, but only if the money is comparable. Mm-hmm. If somebody else has got 400 and you got 150 or 2, then none of the other stuff matters. You're not in that game. But if you can get in the game with the money, then it might really come down to the relationship. Like, all money's equal. Where you want to go? I'll go with the guy I like more. I'll go with the place that whatever. But his thing was, if you don't have the money, you're wasting your time. And I asked him, I said, when you sit down with a mom, dad, family now, how quickly does the money come up? And he laughed and he said, if you're sitting down with them, it's already come up. You're not sitting down with them if it hasn't already come up.
Well, this is I'll tell you guys this, like when rankings came out, when we did rankings last month, usually historically rankings come out and your phone starts buzzing right away. And it's like the AAU coach, the college coach, even though they'll all tell you they don't care. They care. Trust me. Right. My text messages say
I see DeMarcus Cousins try to fight a recruiting guy in a, that's an exaggeration. I shouldn't say that.
That wasn't me, but
it was at Peach Jam at the Marriott, everybody stayed. Not try to fight. That's an overstatement, but like was visibly frustrated and wanted to talk about it in the lobby of the Marriott.
That's funny. You know who I won't name them, but you know who my first 4 messages were this year? Probably the 4 biggest agencies in basketball. And they were all like, it was professional. They were all great, but like, that's just where it's at now.
Right. And one last thing on this, and then we'll move on. I want to get both your thoughts on this, because I also was talking to, the grassroots coaches, and I had one grassroots coach. He said, like, listen, Boozer, like the top of the top, there's always going to be high demand for that. He said, but if you're not one of those guys now, this was the quote, 5 stars are basically treated like 3 stars now. And that might be a slight over, whatever. But his point was, let's just think of it like this. Coaches are telling all of us they do not want to offer as many high school players as they used to. Now, just take that all across the high major level. If in the summer, high major programs used to offer, let's just say 4 or 5, just to make the math easy, 4 or 5 high school players a year. If now they're only offering 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, then the number of people getting high major offers at the high school level is going down dramatically. Do you see that in your reporting, Fink? That say this one coach told me, if you're ranked 150 to 300, you cannot get offers anymore that you used to get pretty regularly.
I've always thought offers were not tangible, right. Like they're often, like this week was a terrific example. There was reports of a kid getting an offer from a blue blood type program that hits social media, and quickly you get a text and say, we didn't offer. Now they can't put that out there.
Right.
But, so offers, like I haven't tweeted a scholarship offer in the last 5 years. And the reason I don't do it is because it's very difficult to confirm, and it's impossible to confirm on the record. And oftentimes it is, it's not real, or it's it's certainly not real for an undefined period of time. And it's not like a baseball card you can collect, which is the way they are perceived on social media. What I will say though, is if we think about where kids end up, I don't think that number has really changed, at least at the high major level. What I do think has changed is the timing of it. So what we've seen in the last couple of years is a rush of high school recruiting. And it starts in June, where we already saw about 4 nationally ranked kids commit in the 2 weeks before the recruiting period. And it'll go for like basically through September. Now, once practice starts and some of these official visits, they start to slow down. And then the early signing period comes in November. Once that's over, like coaches, they're done with high school recruiting now for the most part. So I still think there's an emphasis on recruiting high school kids from June to November for the programs that are smart and recognize you still have to make that a part of your roster construction approach. I don't know how it impacts offers because I just don't really consider offers to be very real in many cases. But in terms of where kids up and when and where they are committing, I don't think we've seen much differentiation in that in years past. Like I still think the same number of kids are committing to the same number of schools. The same number of top 100 kids are committing around the same times. The exception to that is, like I said, there's definitely a seasonal component to it now. Summer and fall is the big high school rush. After that, unless, to your previous point, GP, you are a big time kid,
right?
Recruiting's basically on hold once the season's in play and once the portal's open.
I will say this to tag it. There is a coach at a top 25 level program, made a good run in the tournament last year. I won't name the coach because I don't know, frankly, if the coach has publicly declared this or not. So I'll consider the comments off record, who has said, like, I'm not recruiting freshmen. And I did not see that coach out at all. Not to say that he won't go out, but I think that's evidenced by how he has recruited the past year or so. And then I talked to another coach in a multi-bid league, and which is, not like a high major. And I was talking to him, the typical, like, all right, tell me how much you love your team, yada, yada. He's like, no, I actually do love my team because I don't have a single freshman on the roster this upcoming season. Okay. I could not be happier right now that my team is this old. So eventually you're going to have to filter them in. These guys got to go to college. But for two kind of micro examples, you do see a little bit more of that. And it's also evidenced in the value and the production of freshmen. We'll see if that changes once the COVID year goes away. But there's definitely a tenor of like the July live period from a coaching perspective not feeling as urgent and all important as it once was. There are any number of factors on why that's the case.
I had multiple coaches, and then we'll move on, tell me that we should be clear. There are coaches who feel very strongly about the way they need to be doing this now. And then there are coaches who totally disagree with them and feel very strongly about that. There's no blanket way to do this. We're still trying to figure it out. But I had multiple coaches tell me their roster building strategy now is I'm only trying to enroll three different types of people: freshmen who can help, transfers who can help, and then I thought this was interesting. And then I will fill out my roster with other high school players because they're cheaper. It's like undrafted free agents and second round picks. I don't want to have to spend my NIL on my 10th guy or my 9th guy, too much of it. So that's where I'm going to take high school players, and knowing I'm probably not going to use them. And if I can keep them, great. Internal development. If I lose them, whatever, I'll go find somebody who looks just like them. But you take freshmen who can help you, transfers who can help you, fill out your roster with cheap high school players.
Can I add 10-second addendum to that? And get them to sign 2-year contracts. Now that more and more kids are putting this on paper, I've heard coaches say, we're trying to get everybody to sign 2-year contracts. It's not that they can't get a lawyer and fight it, but then they got to go through the process of geting a lawyer and fighting it. And that's
on that note, and we're going to take a break here before we kind of jump into other prospects. There was buzz, and we got more to talk about with Dybantsa, but since you specifically brought this up, AJ Dybantsa and Tyran Stokes both played at Prolific Prep, but Tyran Stokes, the number one player in 26, he's going to go transfer to Notre Dame Prep, which is based in California, and Dybantsa is going to go play at Utah Prep, which is obviously like random as hell. Like, let's just say he's from Massachusetts. He went and played at Prolific Prep out near Wine Country in California. Now he's going to do this, and I asked him, and he said, no, they wanted 2 years, and I told them from the start, it's going to be 1 year, and then we're going to come back, and then we're going to talk again, and we'll see if it's another year. They did that. It was not 2 years, and this is not college. Remember, this is.
He's saying Prolific wanted 2 years, or Utah wanted 2 years?
He's saying Prolific wanted 2 years. They would not agree to it, and it said it's going to be 1 year. So now he's going to play at Utah Prep with JJ Meneghet, who's a 5-star level point guard. We saw at Adidas, et cetera, et cetera. But there's more on Dybantsa we can talk about. Yeah. In fact, now to get it ready, because I think that's an opening segment. We got to touch on a ton of stuff. We got to throw like 10 players at Fink, if not more. But first, word from our partners.
So like I mentioned, I went to Peach Jam, but I did not go to the Adidas event. Both of you guys did. So let me ask you this, because I did hear this from various coaches. They said, listen, Peach Jam is still the place to be. The Nike event is still the biggest and the best, but the gap is closing, and Adidas was great. Do you guys agree with that?
You take it away first, Fink.
By far the best hospitality room of the first
God.
week of the.
I'm going to need to resist spending 5 minutes on this period. Okay.
Amazing.
Well, at Peach Jam, they kind of shut us out now.
Oh, you didn't get in?
I didn't try because I didn't want to get kicked out, so I don't even try.
Your boy tried and got in and out, but we can keep it moving here.
That's tough.
I just didn't want to be the guy getting stopped at the door at the club and TMZ shooting it. I didn't want to be standing at the door of the hospitality room and then and there's like
we have mutual friends who I'm sure did not take that approach.
I'm certain.
Me being one of them. I was Danny Ocean on this, okay, and I pulled it off. That's all I got to say. But we can. I didn't
want a bunch of coaches watching me get rejected from the door, so I don't even try. I just went and bought a spicy chicken sandwich from the concession stand.
What's also funny about this, and we will get to the players, I promise, but just indulge a little bit here. Well, let's just indulge. Like you go because the peaches are, frankly, they're tremendous. But it is homemade egg salad sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly and like Lay's chips. But the cookies and the homemade Rice Krispie treats. That's why you want to get up. Like but it's so simple, like mom and pop. And then Adidas. So GP hasn't been there. Next year you have to go Parrish because the facility. I'm telling you, people talked about the Adidas. It's in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I think it's like 5 years old. It's a former warehouse. It is a phenomenal facility to hold one of these things. And the hospitality area, unless you play in the arena, which is like the sunken down actual like mini arena portion of it, everything else is like courts like you know and see. You can stay in the hospitality area. They have a perch and you can literally watch any other game of the 6 or 7 courts that are around you and never leave the hospitality area. There's free coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but there were coaches mainlining this stuff. Credit to Adidas. Peach Jam is the crown jewel and probably always will be, but I'm telling you, Adidas, in addition to, when we want to get to the talent they had there, they have struck gold with the location and the facility and just the way they run the event, treat the media, treat the coaches. The NBA scouts are able to be there throughout now. So there's a lot of intermingling that we didn't have for a long, long time. Like rave reviews for how Adidas actually ran its shop. No doubt.
No doubt. And from a player perspective, I'll cite the numbers because I think that's, when you're talking about circuit versus circuit, it gets, very political. But here's what I'll tell you. Adidas has 5 of the top 10 players in the rising senior class. They have 2 of the top 5 rising sophomores. So yes, I think that this is the best year we've seen at Adidas in a long time from a talent standpoint. And I think that was the feedback that you got from the college coaches too, not just with the high end top of the class talent, because you've got guys like Darryn Peterson, like Peat, like Mikal Brown, like, Isaiah Harwell, his team, the Utah Prospects, they won the whole thing. He didn't even play. This is a guy who's been out with a torn ACL. He's a top 10 player in the class. He didn't play and his team won it. So you've got 5 of the Nate Ament, another top 10 prospect in the class. So 5 of the top 10 players in the class are at Adidas. And they've done a terrific job rebuilding that circuit. And like Matt said, the hospitality, the facility itself is not specific to Adidas. Under Armour was there in May. The NCAA Academy is actually going to be there in 2 weeks. But to have it on the first week of the recruiting period is certainly a bonus. Now, conversely, like the reason why you get those homemade sandwiches at the Peach Jam is because when you're in Augusta, Georgia, and North Augusta, South Carolina, being separated only by that river, the entire community backs that event. So that is like, it's not the professionally catered stuff you'll have at Adidas, but it's like the local people. And you really feel that Southern hospitality when you're down there because they are like there and appreciative of you being there. And it's a very cool vibe there too. That's hard to beat from a just the aura of the Peach Jam and the energy of the Peach Jam is hard to beat. But this was, no doubt about it, this was a phenomenal year and event for Adidas this year.
Yeah. Peach Jam is definitely like there's a lot of what Fink just mentioned there, and that's frankly it's a major selling point, venue to venue, and I think even Nike people would I'll say it because Fink doesn't want to, nor am I going to ask him to. Nike people would admit like where Adidas is now holding, and I didn't go to Under Armour this year. I know Under Armour's down. Again, I can say it more than Fink can. Everyone said Under Armour was way down this year, so I can't speak to the event there or the place that was held at. Where they actually hold the Peach Jam, a lot of people think it's outgrown the Riverview Park Activity Center, but there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it. And the way they do the main gym, like that still generally works. But yeah,
that facility. They've added
They've added gyms.
they
and it's
built.
Still, and it's by the way, it's still cold as hell.
Yeah, really cold. Yeah,
Pack the joggers because I forgot like a rookie. Adam,
I mean, I came home with a little bit of a cold, and I don't know what I can attribute to exactly, but I think it's you're so cold inside, and you walk outside and it's 100 degrees, and then you go back inside and it's cold. I have no knowledge of how that stuff works. I assume it can't be perfect for you.
Yeah,
I will tell you guys this. In my ESPN days, when we were on air in the short sleeve polo shirts, we would all have like winter coats. Like we're off air. I'm like, give me my coat. And then, you're buttoned up like you're outside calling a football game and go back on air. You shed the coat.
And if folks are wondering why this is the case, it's because the guys are playing the games. They want to keep their temperature regulated and normal. But if you're not doing that, you're just sitting in one place for most of the day. That's what's.
One of the lasting images of I think Peach Jam. Is it Roy Williams with a blanket over his legs in the gym?
Was it Roy? Was it Boeheim? It was someone.
I thought it was Roy. I don't mean that.
That's the
either
way.
Wrong. Yeah, but yes, you Peach Jam is a place where you might see a college basketball coach carrying a blanket to cover his legs because he's cold.
They're not messing around. I mean, the quarter zip that Fran McCaffrey was rocking in the hospitality room with the Iowa quarter zip, but like he was ready for a mid January Iowa winter, and I don't blame him whatsoever. By the way, if you're just kind of checking in on the recruiting stuff, Adam mentioned it there. So Adidas's Three Stripes Select Basketball Championship, it finished on Sunday. Now Peach Jam is still rolling through this upcoming Sunday. GP and I were down there. You're probably, if you're really into this stuff and following on social media, you follow a bunch of national media members, national recruiting guys, you'll probably see and hear more about these events later in the week because they're going to get down into bracket play after they leave pool play, and you'll kind of see more NBA TV. The NBA is overseeing a lot of this stuff. And oh, by the way, before we get to I still want to touch on some more Adidas stuff, Fink, but before we get into that, part of why like Peach Jam is longer now, the NBA is like overseeing all this stuff, and there has been a directive straight up from the top of the NBA is we don't want these guys, unless your bracket play kind of necessitates it. We saw a little bit of that with Adidas. They're only playing one game a day, and so now the Peach Jam schedule is so extended out. There are pros and cons to this, frankly. But that is partly why. But I think it actually works in Adidas's favor. I think that it ran when it ran and concluded on Sunday, and now kind of Peach Jam takes center stage. Even though it's not the only event, it's obviously it's the biggest event there. Can we talk two of the top five guys here? Darryn Peterson, Koa Peat, Fink on the Adidas end. So I saw them both play multiple times. Koa Peat played with USA Basketball. He was on the West Coast. He took a red eye. It's one of those things, like, unless you're like so deep into this, you don't really care. But however, the coaches that are recruiting the NBA people, like, he took a red eye, landed, because one of the coaches was on his same flight. They landed in Charlotte at 4:45 a.m. and he was playing, I think he would left. I think it was a 9:30 a.m. game or 9:45 a.m. game, and he looked ridiculous. He was even better that night playing against Peterson head-to-head, and I think he had a stinker the next day, which he's more than entitled to be allowed. But my question for you is this. We'll get to Boozer and Dybantsa in a minute here, but Darryn Peterson, who's a combo guard, who is physical as hell, looks like a genuinely tremendous athlete, but could also go, and I don't know if he's ever played football in his life, but he's got like a build that's both built for basketball and football. He had a great run of it, at least this past weekend. Would you consider Peterson and then Koa Peat, who's this bouncy power forward that continues to get better and really shines in big moments? Are they, and even though they're all top five players, Boozer and AJ, we know the rep on them, and we'll get to them. For you, are Peterson and Koa Peat in that same tier as those other two? Not quite.
Okay. Peterson's the best guard in the class, and if anybody's in that tier with Boozer and Dybantsa, it's him. He's a 6'5" guard with a 6'10" wingspan. He's in the best shape of his life, as you just mentioned, and he's got like this effortless ability to create his own offense at multiple levels. This maturity to his game. He's already got a documented NIL deal from Adidas, so he's an Adidas sponsored athlete. They've got Sam Mitchell, the former NBA coach, coaching his grassroots team. It's the same thing they did for Jalen Green when he was playing on the Adidas circuit. So everything about him right now has this kind of professional type of aura around it. And to his credit, I got some time to talk with him, did just a one-on-one interview that you can find on the 24/7 Sports channel right now. He's an awesome kid. Like, He scored 38 points. First game of the weekend on Tuesday night. It was a one possession game. He and I talked about this. One possession game, 1 minute left in the game. One of his teammates coming down on the break, like looks him off, and like just don't do that. And Darryn, to his credit, like grabs him, talks to him, and then like smacks him in the butt afterwards in like a positive way. Didn't cuss him out, didn't get on him. And so to have like all those professional expectations around you when you're a 17-year-old kid and yet still carry yourself with humility, that's part of like the secret sauce to the evaluating here, is to see which of the highly talented kids are capable of handling the success and the notoriety and continuing to get better. Guys like Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren, they did that. They were celebrated at a young age and they took it all in stride and they kept getting better and better and better. The guys who didn't, we don't talk about them anymore because they haven't made it. And that's like a hard part, a hard part of this whole process is being able to take all the attention that comes with it and maintaining your desire to get better. And I think Peterson has done that.
Do you think players understand exactly what you just explained, that just as much as the 38 points, there are college coaches recruiting, Darryn, who saw the same thing you saw and they liked that. They would rather watch him be encouraging to a teammate as opposed to flip out on a teammate. That stuff matters.
Yeah, it does. And do I think some kids do and some kids don't? Some parents do and some parents don't. There are top 10 players in the class right now that some schools aren't recruiting because they don't want to deal with the people around them. I mean, that's like people on social media. I tweeted that the other day and people on social media like don't believe it, but that's a fact. I mean, I'm not going to name names because that's right. Wouldn't be the right thing to do. But that is a fact each and every year, especially now in the era of NIL where monetization has gone to unprecedented heights. Like being able to come in and impact winning and being able to buy into the team concept while still simultaneously being conscious of your brand and your ability to get to the NBA, because those are real factors for these kids and these families. But being able to do it in a team concept is really, really important. And again, I said it earlier, like Steph Castle is the great example of that. Top 10 player in the class, but as Dan Hurley has said multiple times, like he came in here, he was willing to get coached. He was willing to go into a system to play a position that he thought he was, he thought he was a point guard. UConn played him at the 3. They win a national championship. He's the 4th pick in the draft or whatever, and it works out for everybody. I don't know that a lot of kids recognize that you don't have to get 30 every game, and there's other variables that go into helping yourself in the long run. I think sometimes they have the goalposts a little off in their mind.
On that note, this isn't Hurley talking about any specific recruit.
No, this is the name that popped into my head. He has spoken publicly even about there are things that are just turnoffs for him, no matter how talented you are.
And I saw him at both Adidas and Nike, so I'm not going to say which event he said this about and which player he said this about, but UConn's in it's in as good of a position from a recruiting standpoint as it's probably been since Calhoun in the mid to late 2000s, probably. And they are still very much like the things that matter to Dan Hurley in recruiting 2 years ago and 4 years ago, like still matter to him a ton. And just because UConn can be in a position to recruit a lot of these players doesn't mean that he is going to chase them. And it was interesting to kind of hear him talk through that. I'm not going to get into specific details, but since you particularly brought up Steph Castle, like he referenced a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned, Adam, like Hurley just brought up over the weekend. That was intriguing to know. Real quick on the recruitments, I don't know how much you can or want to go into in terms of what schools are chasing these guys, but particularly with Peterson and Koa Peat, Peterson, frankly, it looked like there were 12 notable schools that were at his games, and I can't decipher, nor am I trying to decipher who's actually in there versus who's not. But what should we know about where their recruitments are at this stage? Again, these are 2 of the top 5 players in the class of 25.
So first of all, let me, if I could, just shout out a piece that my colleagues over at 24/7 just did going into the week. Eric Bossi and Travis Branham, they have the top 25 players in the class, and it's one document that has an update on everybody's recruitment. So it's like one-stop shopping if you want to know where those guys are recruited. In terms of Peterson, what I can say is it's been an evolving process. Like you mentioned Hurley and not wanting to say who he was following, but the reality is these coaches are tracked, like on social media. So we know exactly who they're all watching. And that's why they get upset to, we were saying earlier, like if if you're talking about who was watching AJ Dybantsa and you don't mention a coach who was there, you'll get a text because they want the players to know and the public to know who they're watching. So we know who UConn's recruiting. We know who Arkansas is recruiting. We know who Kentucky and Duke are recruiting. In terms of Peterson, again, it's complicated because he has an NIL deal with Adidas that I'm told will technically expire at the end of the year, whether or not he re-signs. That's certainly a domino in his recruitment to consider. He is expected to visit Ohio State, which is a hometown school. There was reports this week that he's going to take a visit to USC. Obviously, Eric Musselman has recruited McDonald's All-Americans in the past and done it very effectively. The two schools that are most often considered in his recruitment, though, are Kansas, kind of the flagship Adidas school, and Arkansas with John Calipari. Now, the other point I'll make there is there's other variables at play, like Mikel Brown, who's also on the Adidas circuit. He's also considering some of those schools. Darius Acuff on the Nike circuit. He's also considering Arkansas and Kansas. It is hard to imagine a scenario where Darryn Peterson and Darius Acuff go to the same college because they're both going to want the ball in their hands to a certain extent. So there are dominoes at play there. But I think those four schools are some of the ones to know: Ohio State, USC, Arkansas, and Kansas for Peterson. Baylor's a sneaky one to watch as well.
Okay. On that note, GP, I'll let you hop back in here real quick. I just got a few notes for him. By the way, he mentioned Acuff. We can talk on him. I saw him. He plays with the family on Nike. He's the 5th player in the top 5 for 2025 per 247 Sports. So you've got AJ Dybantsa 1, Cameron Bruiser 2, Peterson, who's like a combo guard, but really like a shooting guard's body. He's 3. He plays with Adidas. Acuff plays with Nike. He's 4. And then Peat plays with Compton Magic. He's 5. What about Peat? He was a known talent a year ago for sure. But actually, I'll note this as well. In my opinion, although their bodies might have changed slightly, watching Peat and Cameron Boozer a year ago, Adam, and then seeing this past weekend doesn't feel like they got noticeably taller, bigger. They seem to be the same size players year over year, which obviously, like the NBA guys, you talk to them there, they certainly note those things. Not that they can't continue growing, but whereas like a Nate Ament, who's a 7th ranked player, like he grew 3 inches in the past 8 months allegedly. I couldn't help but notice that. I'm being long-winded. Peat recruitment. What should the people know?
We're expecting a list cut later this month. Arizona, Arkansas, Baylor, Duke, maybe Houston, some of the programs to watch. To your previous point about the physical tools there, Koa has been pretty much this size since he was a freshman. Now, when he was a freshman, he came out with the Compton Magic and led the Adidas circuit in scoring as a freshman. So for all we talk about, you asked the question before, how do these guys rank against Boozer and Dybantsa? When it comes to sheer production, like who had the best high school career, not who's the best long-term prospect, but Peat has had as good a high school career as any of those guys, been just as impactful with USA basketball. When it gets to upside and things like that, that's when you start to say, like, all right, he's not growing anymore. He's a little smaller. He's really long into it. He's strong. To his credit, he's really worked to develop his frame, because when you're done growing, you've got to maximize what you have. And I think his body's gotten a lot better. He's got to get a little more consistent with 3-point shooting and try and stretch his game along. But he is as productive a player as there's been in high school basketball in this class. And those are some of the schools we are expecting an official list cut after the recruiting period.
All right, we've mentioned AJ Dybantsa a few times. Haven't really talked about him in any detail yet. I want to do that next. But first, let's get another word from our partners. So, Fink, you see these guys almost always before we see them and more often than we see them. But I did see AJ Dybantsa last year at Peach Jam for the first time, sat down, spent 20 minutes with him. He was delightful. That's one where you walk in the gym, you watch 5 minutes and you go, all right, that's what it looks like. That's exactly what it's supposed to look like. That's what that's what a future number 1 pick in the draft looks like. Was at Prolific Prep, now at Utah Prep. I asked, before I get to that part of the story, just let's stop here. Okay. Is it clear to you that, barring injuries, all that stuff, this is this is a number one pick in the draft type of guy someday?
Type of guy? Yes. Is it guaranteed he's the number one pick in the draft? No way. It's not guaranteed that Cooper Flagg is the number one pick in the draft. I know that's not a popular take, but like none of this stuff is guaranteed. And like, listen, Josh Jackson, Harry Giles, Marvin Bagley, like I can go on for days, like about guys who are supposed to be no-brainers, and for whatever reason, and there's a variety of reasons that can derail these kids. It doesn't work out that way. So history has shown us that no one is a guarantee. But AJ does have that talent level that, as you said, it's glaring, and it's not nuanced. It doesn't take anybody who's looking for subtleties to make somebody have a greater probability than the next guy. AJ, it's just obvious because he's 6'9", he's athletic, he's a shot maker, he knows how to get to his spots. He can rise up over people. He's basically a 6'9" jumbo wing who can score, who can make explosive plays in transition, who can get to his spots and score in the half court. And it's just clear as day when you watch him, and you don't need any level of expertise to be able to see it.
The way I always say it, it's like my wife could walk in the gym and she'd be like, "Oh my God, who is that?" It's that obvious.
So, I got to rave on Dybantsa here. I did get to talk with him for 6 or 7 minutes on Sunday after chatting with his father, just to get a sense of where they are in their lives and all this stuff. And their Oakland Soldiers team, there was someone carrying got to document all this stuff, and which they should, but I don't know if they're making a documentary on this or whatever. But a year ago, Dybantsa played with Expressions Elite. And then, which is based out of Mass, and then Frank, I'm almost positive Expressions is based out of where he's from. Then Stokes, his teammate, who's the number one guy in 26, who we can also talk about for a minute here. He played for Vegas. I want to say Vegas's Nike team, and then they're on the same team. And they are eminently watchable when they play together. Dybantsa on the floor. Okay, it is. All right, here's my, and this is part of what I'm going to write on, because I talked with 24 coaches and NBA scouts. I was like, all right, give me who you like most, the whole thing, not as prospects for going into college, but like everything. Flagg, Dybantsa, Stokes. I had a few people give me Stokes, and a few people give me Flagg. But let's say I talked to 25, I'd say 15 or 16 of the 25 gave me Dybantsa. And it's easy to understand why. One coach I was sitting next to was like, you know what's insane is he's like 6'8", 6'9", and he's like a wing. He's a small forward, but he plays like a shooting guard. Like if you really had to truly define him, he's more shooting guard than he is small forward. He is always talking on the court. His hands are super active. He is so long. He never seems to tire. His mid-range, even though the mid-range game has kind of fallen out of vogue and he can shoot from deep, his propensity to know how to shoot from the mid-range. He's also a guy who is into basketball at the level he is because he wanted to play football. Not that he didn't want to play basketball, but like he hit a growth spurt when COVID hit, and his parents were basically like, it's going to be hoops now. And he kind of put all his effort into it, and you see what he's grown into. It's ridiculous. And the Cooper Flagg hype is deserved. I can't wait to see what he does in Duke. I think his inclusion in the sport is such a positive for college basketball. And yeah, he's got a great shot at being the number one pick if it all comes together. I think Dybantsa is going to be the better college player, particularly if he goes to the right kind of, I should say this. If he I think Flagg going to Duke, or if he had gone to UConn, those clearly seem like spots that will enable him to be a superstar. If Dybantsa takes the same route and picks the right staff for the right reasons that will enable him to be a superstar, then he can be just as impactful at the college level. And to see him play alongside Stokes, who is even more animated on the floor, who is a year younger in class and has a tremendous stroke to him. He looked bigger than a year ago for sure. Dybantsa looked bigger than me than a year ago. They're something else, man. Like they are a 1-2 that is up there with some of the best. And again, I'm not the recruiting expert here. I'm just going off of every year going to Peach Jam in Vegas in years past and trying to get eyes on the top 10 to 15 prospects. And it's not just those two. They're just the two superstars. That team, I don't know. I'm fascinated to see what they do in tournament play here, Adam, over the next 6 days or so, because they actually got really pushed by the Wrens, and that was good to watch them truly get pushed and how they responded. They're just a dynamite. They're a dynamite 1-2. Your thoughts on anything more with kind of Dybantsa, his recruitment? By the way, his dad said,
this is what I wanted to ask Fink about.
Et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead.
Can
Yeah,
I
okay,
answer
so
something else?
yeah, please. Oh, well, okay. So a couple
No,
things.
I'm
And
just kidding. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
no, I hear you. On the point you just made, Norlander, I randomly had a coach. We were just talking, and he said, actually, it's a few different people, but the consensus I was left, not that there's a consensus, but these are things I heard. Cooper Flagg's going to be awesome at Duke. Will he be the National Player of the Year? They were like, that might be hard because there's so many older guys and they're back in school and whatever, but he's going to be great. But this is what one person told me. It's not going to pop like Kevin Durant popped at Texas and go out and get 32, stuff like that. He's going to be an awesome college basketball player. And they thought Dybantsa could be the guy who is like, does a Kevin Durant type thing in a 1 year of college if he were to do a 1 year of college. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, because Dybantsa is the more polished scorer. And,
right.
It's like last year, at this event last year, Cooper was playing the 16 and under, as was Cam Boozer. And I should also say, I think Cam Boozer is and should be in this conversation.
We're getting there. Don't you worry. Yes, we'll get,
So, but Dybantsa is the guy who was playing 17s and led the event in scoring as however old he was while playing up at that time 2 age brackets. So while it's always been known that he was going to end up reclassifying up, because remember, he reclassified up last year too. Cooper went up to 2024. Dybantsa went up to 2025. I should also say, like, I live in Connecticut. Cooper's from Maine. Dybantsa's from Massachusetts. People in this part of the country have been talking about which of these two guys is better for the last 4 years. And this is not because these guys were both obvious talents when they were in 8th grade. So they've been dealing with this limelight for a long time. Dybantsa is the more natural scorer. He is the guy who puts up points and that's the way he dominates the game is with his scoring. Cooper dominates it in other ways. In many respects, Cooper isn't even comfortable yet being the overall alpha. I think it's very, people are saying, is he going to be the college player of the year next year? I think it's very possible he's not the leading scorer on his Duke team next year. If there's a good line on Caleb Foster, somebody send it to me. But Dybantsa is the scorer. He's the guy you throw to in the ISO and say, like, go, you know how to do this. This is what you do. You create your own shot in any spot on the floor. Cooper's learning that and he's developing that. And a big part of that was playing with his Maine United team last year where he had to do that. Because people forget, like, his first year at Montverde, he averaged 9 points a game. Like, and he was good. He impacted winning, but it was the defense, it was the passing, it was all those other things. And he's growing into kind of embracing this offensive alpha role. AJ's always had that mentality. Now, AJ can't impact the game defensively like Cooper can. He can't pass like Cooper can. I think there's an argument to be made that he can't impact winning with as many in as versatile of ways as Cooper can. But when it just comes to like, hey, I need a bucket right now, who are you going to give the ball to? Then yeah, it's probably AJ.
So I'm sort of, I think everybody goes about it different ways, but I tend to write in my head a lot, like ideas and structure and that stuff, even before I sit down with the computer. And so I knew that there would be one point in this column where I'm trying to emphasize, after explaining that high school prospects are not prioritized the way they used to be by high major programs, I want to have a paragraph where I say, oh, sure, there's, clearly some staff would be thrilled and would kill to get a commitment from Dybantsa tomorrow, right? That type of prospect is still a real difference maker as a freshman. So with this in mind, I want to be able to attach a staff to it. Like, and so I asked somebody, I said, if I got to use a staff, like who's the team to beat? If I were asking you right now for AJ Dybantsa, and immediately, you know what the guy said? BYU.
More of us? What?
That is not like the super insider people who are all over recruiting websites. I'm sure. I don't think the casual college basketball. Yeah, I don't think the casual. I think when the casual college basketball fan hears that, they go, "What?" But I said, "For real," and
for real.
He's going to school in Utah right now. That's BYU just hired a coach with a pro background. And, let's just
say what it is. Off the charts. Their NIL is off the charts.
Because they happen to have a big-time billionaire, the owner of the Jazz and all, Ryan Smith. There's that as well. And I'll say this on that, and then take it away, Fink. Because NIL dominates everything, unprompted from a few different coaches over the past couple of days. It's like, well, how much in NIL do you think Dybantsa will get? And it wasn't. The number was minimum 3, could be as much as 5, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're headed.
But to your BYU point, and it's not saying it's going to be BYU, but he is going to play in Utah for his final year of high school ball. Dybantsa is the type of talent, particularly as like every year NIL becomes more and more in the mainstream. Yes, could he earn plenty of that through a collective? Sure, but he could be such a known quantity that you say Utah, like Marriott could want to include him in NIL stuff. It could be actual like big time legitimate Fortune 500 type of businesses. And so his NIL package, if you will, depending on where he lands, will be interesting. And frankly, although this, I don't know if this wins the day or not, the coaches that are recruiting are basically of the understanding like that part of it is going to, like, you need to have that, to state the obvious, like you need to have that in order here. Like you have to have it. And this is not taboo, nor should it be. It's just he's going to understandably command that. And if you're listening and curious on this stuff, because we've had a couple of highly ranked prospects not go to college. Remember, G League Ignite's no longer a thing. And his dad was like, no. You got to ask it just to be sure. And he's like, no, he is absolutely going to play college basketball. So he's going to end up somewhere. And when he does, he'll enter the season with arguably just as much hype as Cooper Flag.
College basketball is now the highest bidder. In years past, it was not. So that's why we didn't think Amani Bates was ever going to go to college. That's why, we saw kids go to the NBL in Lithuania or whatever. But college basketball at this point in time is now the highest bidder. And AJ Dybantsa, the expectation is that it's just what GP said, is that, this is going to be a big time NIL deal. And there are at least 2 players that publicized in this NIL cycle that they got $2 million plus. Those players are nowhere near the stature. They're 4 or 5 years older than AJ is. But if those guys,
and Coleman Hawkins, just on reference for those listening.
Thank you. And if those guys got $2 million plus, like if I can guarantee you, AJ's gonna anybody associated with AJ is gonna think he's worth more than that.
That's right. And the other thing that's interesting, and I heard this from various coaches, like how quickly all of this has escalated. Like I talked to one coach, he was like, I got $2.5 million in NIL, and that 2 years ago, that was great. And now I'm like getting destroyed. I need 7 now. It's changed that much, that quickly.
I heard a great pitch the other day because I said to somebody, on the road having these same conversations, and I was like, how do you guys get these people just to throw you $1 million? Like with no, and it's and the sell was this. It's like, what do you want to go be pay to be like, have club seats at the local professional sports team, or do you want to be a part owner of the college team?
There you go.
Like you can use your money here and you can be a part of it. You have ownership of it, and not literally, but close. And in terms of the access and the influence and stuff like that. And yeah, the buying part is through the roof. And I think, and I'll just say this as a passing comment, I think what is now differentiating a good job from a bad job is no longer facilities and all that stuff. That's just like the barrier to entry. It's like, do you have to raise the money on your own, or does somebody raise the money for you? And when you see some of these coaches renegotiating, I think they're renegotiating not necessarily for their own contracts, but for that.
Well, John Calipari said this. John said this. He said, at Kentucky, I'm paraphrasing here, but he more or less said at Kentucky, I had to get the money together. Yeah. And at Arkansas, the money's already together. It's waiting for me.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's a major thing. Yeah, without a doubt. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that's been a major talk. There are other coaches that didn't take jobs because they were given assurances that their NIL situation was going to be able to be vastly improved, so they wouldn't have to do it all themselves. I mean, I can think of a few of them off the top of my head, like the coaches that, according to them and their staffs, like they raised every single dollar and they did what they had to do over the past 2 years to survive, but they're exhausted by it. And so finally, new deals come out, or and all that kind of stuff changes. Let's talk Cameron Boozer, the Boozer twins. His brother Caden's also a top 20 player at 247. recruitment and otherwise. Boozer is someone who I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Fink, but for the most part, when he has played like other top 3, top 4 type talents in those games specifically, almost always either won or been better than the highly ranked player in the same game. What is your eval on Boozer? And I know you're going to see him more and more. Like they won. I think they won 15U and 16U Peach Jam.
Yep.
I mean, he's just won. He's just been a ridiculous winner. They're based out of Miami, and I think, although if you want to add a school or two, you can. Feels like his recruitment is Miami, Florida, and then Duke. Does Boozer have any shot of eventually taking the number 1 in your opinion? What are your thoughts on his recruitment, his game overall? Fun as hell player to watch, and obviously a big next few days to see if he can three-peat at Peach Jam.
I think Boozer is the most reliable player in high school basketball. If you need to win a game right now, or you need a player who is capable of fitting into a college program right away from next year, there's no one I would rather take. Now, I said if I needed a bucket, if I needed somebody to go get me 20 points, AJ Dybantsa is the guy I'm taking. If I want the guy who I think is the best long-term prospect, it's AJ. If I need to win a high school game right now, if I need to win a college game on November 1st of next year, it's Cameron Boozer. He's too complete. He's too smart. He's too efficient. He can fit in with anybody. He doesn't have to be the man. In fact, similar to Cooper, I think there's an argument to be made that he's sometimes even more comfortable because he is an exceptional passer in a variety of different ways. He can pass off the dribble. He's got like the Kevin Love style long outlet passes down pat. He's an excellent rebounder. He's 6'9", and he's much more fluid laterally than he gets credit for. So he's a very versatile defender. This guy makes threes. He's not the alpha creator that AJ is, and I would even say Cooper is. He's behind those guys as a creator, but he gets 20 every time out, and he impacts the game in so many different ways. Again, there's nobody more reliable in high school basketball. And I just did all that talking about how nothing is a guarantee. Cameron Boozer is the closest thing to a guarantee that there is in high school basketball, because this guy's not going to beat or hurt himself.
I think a lot of people just would assume his last name and connect it to Duke because his father obviously was a star at Duke. This is something I'd heard early in the recruitment. I don't know how true it is. I don't know if it's still true. But one of the things I had heard consistently was every time people write about or talk about these twins, they talk about the dad. The mom's the one you better win over. How real is that?
That's real.
Okay.
That's real.
I have heard the same as well. I've heard again, this isn't even from schools involved in the recruitment. This is more other folks that this is like a fairly wide open race, and Duke shouldn't necessarily be considered the favorite here, which will be intriguing. They're from Miami. Miami has just intensely recruited him. Florida has intensely recruited him. And then also, I guess the brothers have publicly, continued to, this is, again, I won't necessarily ask Adam to speak on this specifically, but I'm not a recruiting guy, so what do I care? The brothers have understandably publicly been like, we are our own recruitments. We want to do this independently, but in talking and getting this message reinforced, I didn't learn it this weekend. It was reinforced. They're expected to absolutely go to the same college. They will play together. Wherever one picks, the other one's going to pick it. And it seems like it'll be one of Miami, Florida, or Duke. We'll see if that changes or not. But Boozer he's such a fun player to watch. And yes, I would define him in limited. I've probably seen him play, I don't know, 10 times in person ever. He just seems so dependable every single 100%. Damn game. Every single game. Like you just know what you're getting. And there's no, like there are occasionally like there's a top 5 prospect where you're like, all right, I like specifically Peat. Like, and you get it, particularly with the circumstances surrounding him. It never seems to follow.
It was on that same team though. Like those guys were all on that USA basketball team that was in Turkey. They all won gold. Like, and when I say all of them, I mean Koa, AJ, Cam, Tyran Stokes, Brandon McCoy.
Yeah.
Those guys all won in Turkey. It was like a week ago. They jump on a plane, they come back, and they all start playing. Koa at least took a couple days off because Adidas started on Tuesday. Nike didn't start till Saturday. So Koa said, he had 4 days earlier, and he said, hold on, I'm not going to play till Thursday. I'm not going to play in these showcase games, which was obviously a smart decision. I will say this. I do expect that the Boozers will in all likelihood play together in high school. But here's where it gets tricky. I think in terms of their recruitments being separate, even if they go to school together, I think it's possible this is going to be, well, likely that this is going to be the last year they are linked, because the expectation is that Cam will be a one and done prospect. And, Caden, I don't know what his path is going to be from a scouting standpoint. I can't tell you that I think that is a probable outcome. Now, whether or not that's like a predetermined thing and they're going to try and really pursue that path regardless of what the draft outcome may be, I don't know that. That would be purely speculative. Obviously, we've seen plenty of those in years past as well. But so that's why, like, if I'm recruiting Cam, and you mentioned those 3 schools, Miami, Florida, and Duke, and I think that's right. They're certainly leading. There's other places that are trying to get in, but I think the way in which those other schools are trying to get in is by selling Caden on the long-term vision for him, whether that's a 1-year plan, 2-year plan, 3-year plan, because like I said, Cam can fit in and star anywhere. And then if you think Caden has like it's a positive place for him to be on whatever his path may be, that is, I think, a way that different schools are approaching the recruitment. So even though, yes, we do expect them to play together, they are to a certain extent being recruited separately, because this is probably going to be the last year that they are aligned one way or the other.
Okay. We've touched on a bunch of big name players. Caleb Wilson, someone that's ranked 6th. He plays with Boozer on the Knight Riders. Damn, did he pop in the game I saw him play on Saturday. Noticeably, like, really impactful player. I didn't realize, frankly, I knew of his name, but if you would have asked me going sit down, I was like, yeah, I think that's like a top 20 kid. He's 6, and understandably so. Like, it might have it might have all come together for him in that game, but I was like, good God, man, you got both Boozers and you've got Caleb Wilson. Like,
yeah, and here's the thing with Caleb is that, candidly, he hasn't had the same spring as some of those other guys did. He didn't make he struggled a little bit in the USA basketball setting. Hasn't had quite the same spring. His recruitment, instead of getting bigger, it's kind of shrunk a little bit. I think Arkansas is in the driver's seat for him right now. Although if he continues the play that you saw, because that's what I've heard, he had a great week, or a great start to the 2 weeks, I should say, that maybe other schools will jump back in. But right now it seems like Arkansas is in the driver's seat for his recruitment. 6'9" wing, really athletic, really wiry, tons of defensive potential, trying to figure out what parts of his offensive game translate a little bit. And that's the thing with him, but it's great to see that he rebounded a little bit, because it has been a little bit of an up and down spring for a guy who's been a top prospect in the class for, basically since the class debuted.
Any other names, either Adidas, just they don't even have 4-star, 5-stars, just either guys you saw or guys that got a little buzz to them, or risers, just some of the non-obvious headliners here that are worth at least mentioning on either stuff they've continued over from the spring, Adam, or just you've through your own eyes or through word of mouth that's kind of popped on either of those circuits, or Under Armour if it applies.
I think Nate Ament is the most highly recruited player in the country right now. He hasn't had a list cut. This is someone who had recruitment last year from places like Duke and Kentucky, but leveled up again. So he made a jump in last spring, and he made another jump again this spring. Incredible young man, like late blooming guy. I think you alluded to it earlier. He's grown 3 inches.
Yeah.
He's about a 6'10", versatile forward, just super fluid, great hands, and still, like, he was another one that I did an extended interview with, and I said to him, I was like, Nate, I hope you receive this as the compliment I intended to be, but I still think your best basketball is a long way ahead of you. Like, you're in the very early stages. So he's someone that, UConn, Duke, Arkansas, Kentucky, you name it, they want him. And he hasn't limited it down yet. So in terms of the player getting the biggest following right now, I think it's him.
On that, real quick, keep going, but I want to say this. At Adidas, the name that just got brought up more, and I think it's because of his rise by the NBA scouts that were there, was Nate by far. And some of that's because a lot of what Peterson is and a lot of what Peat is kind of known, and Nate's kind of jumped. His name was just like, hey, have you seen Nate yet? And in my opinion, like, he looked good, not great, which is completely understandable. But yeah, and then I had another coach at a top 20 program be like, he's going to play 15 years in the NBA. Like, no matter what, like if it projects the way it should, and that's a lot to put on a guy, and he's saying it like on background and whatever, but there's with the length and the shot and all that kind of stuff, a lot of buzz around him meant I think he had a pretty good, if not a great Adidas run of it, but yeah, certainly a lot of noise there. Any other names we should know about though?
I think Mikal Brown is someone to mention. He was on the USAB 18 and under team, because we've had 17s and 18s. They both won gold this summer. He was kind of probably the best true point guard in the class. Another one who's been a late bloomer. He's 6'3" now. He was 5'9" 2 years ago, and he was a 5-star prospect 2 years ago. Just super skilled. Now he's a big point guard, elite passer, really good shooter, just tremendous with the ball. So he's someone I think belongs in that conversation with the guys we're talking about as well.
All right. 105. We're 105 in the middle of July.
Is that a show?
Everybody loves recruiting.
Is that a show?
65 minutes in the middle of July.
I guess that's a show. Man, oh man.
Okay.
Like
Norlander, do you have something else you would like to say?
No, it was not really. I mean, it was a good 5-day trip down to Rock Hill, and then North Augusta. GP and I had a nice dinner.
We
Shouts
did.
to Frog Hollow.
Shouts to Frog Hollow.
Saturday night, which
Just
is
not in the hospitality room.
Say it again.
I was
Just not in the hospitality room.
No, I was scared to even try to get in. I was scared. I didn't want to be publicly rejected, so I didn't even try to say.
Frog Hollow was good though. A lot of buzzy little night there at Frog Hollow too. The secret is no longer a secret with Frog Hollow.
Yeah,
and even less now that we're bringing it up.
In Rock Hill. Did you try Counter with a K?
Yes, I did go to Counter. Yes, you sent it to me. I did Counter, and then when I went to Counter, just went with some other scribes, and Tony Bennett and TJ Altenberger were eating there. And I said, if I took a picture of you two right now and put it on Twitter, people would be like, the over-under in this conversation right now is like 36.5, because they're just defensive specials. They got a good laugh out of it, and they were having a good time there. So, no, it was Counter was a good spot. That was a good rec. Thank you, Adam.
Frog Hollow is like a legitimately great restaurant. Like we go there every year now, and there's another little diner out the back door of that main Marriott, and I didn't go there this year, but I love that diner. There's a little diner right out the back door of that Marriott. I can't remember the name of it though.
I can't remember either. Yeah. Nada, by the way, Nada's giving us grief in the chat because he lives like 25 minutes from Rock Hill, and I didn't notify him.
Here's my Nada shout out. When we were in Rock Hill and I was leaving, he knows I'm a burger connoisseur, so he sends me burgers and barley. So burgers and barley, get ready. I'm coming in 2 weeks when we're back for the NCAA Academy. Nada sent me.
That's the move right there.
All right, Fink, appreciate your time. Norlander, always appreciate your time. I also appreciate my own time. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Terry Teagle, he's a legend. Huck Larnell. Appreciate you guys watching once again. Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you can find podcasts, Apple, Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. And oh, buddy, that slogan could take. Yeah. If we have to attach that to the number one player in the country,
oh my gosh,
that's a different deal. That's a whole nother.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's going to be a special episode. That'll be an emergency episode if AJ Dybantsa decides to become. You know what I mean. We'll talk to you again later. Till then, take care.